Hello, friends. I am so glad that you are here with me today. Thank you for joining me. I forgot what my mug said. Oh, good morning, gorgeous, is what it says. Hey, we should all get our compliments wherever we can find them, can't we? Thank you for joining me today. I am so grateful to have you back with me talking about Pixie Pushes On. Last time, if you remember, we talked a little bit about the Nativity show. We had Pixie and Ricky and Berta and Betsy and everybody was in the Christmas pageant. And Pixie was kind of feeling happy, and then Berta brought her back down by reminding her that Charlotte is in the hospital. And she ran out to see the back of the church, which happened to be where the cemetery was, and that's where Mama was buried. And so she had to come face to face with that memory and that sadness. And Ricky comforted her, so that was a really sweet scene there. Then we had the scene of when Daddy on New Year's Day actually got to see Charlotte. Pixie still can't, but Daddy got to go see Charlotte, and he brought her another letter. And once again, we find out about some of the things that are really bothering Charlotte. Sounds like Charlotte was just a really positive person. Pixie used to say that she would always say, well, I'm lucky and all this stuff no matter what. Even positive, very happy people sometimes have to admit that they're getting sad too. So I think the fact that she's there in the hospital is making Charlotte sad. I did want to point out that you notice that she ends her letters, they both end their letters with the phrase, and it's an old-fashioned phrase, the good Lord willing and the creek don't rise. And that's the way they sign their letters. Just a little side note, a lot of people don't know that when this book was first written, when it was first purchased, and when it first was working on being a book, that was the title, and the creek don't rise. And that was the title for about the first year of this book's life. And then it was only after we had this gorgeous cover here that we all looked at it and said, well, wait, there's no creek. And we loved the cover, and we said, well, maybe we should go another direction with it. And that's when it seemed like a nice idea might be the fact that Pixie pushing on, just not staying down, just saying I can get through this, that might be a better title for it. So just a little FYI, that's what happened. Sometimes books change their titles, sometimes they change a lot. So you never know when you're a writer how things are going to end up. We just always hope for the best. And we're hoping for the best now for Pixie. I'm starting today on page 88, and that would be chapter 19. Looks like my fire's dying a little bit here, but I'm still nice and cozy. To start, chapter 19. Granddaddy and those dang crab apples and rabbits were right about winter. January was the coldest, snowiest month I could remember. The only good thing about it was that school was canceled for weeks at a time when snow shut down the roads. Before I lived here, I thought winter would be easier on a farm with no crops growing. But winter makes chores even harder. Eggs still have to be gathered in the freezing cold, and the animal's water needs to be changed constantly to keep it from turning into a giant piece of ice. Granddaddy doesn't have a ton of animals, but they all still need feeding and tending. There's Molly the milking cow, the horse we call Horse, and some pigs who don't have names since they're raised to go to market. There used to be a mule for helping in the fields, but he died and Granddaddy didn't replace him. And Molly had a calf a while back, but Granddaddy sold it, even though Daddy says the farm needs more livestock. Since the animals are inside the barn most of the winter, it needs raking out every day. Trips to the outhouse in the frosty weather were awful. At least I had a bedpan to use at night, so I didn't have to go out in the dark when, as Granddaddy said, nature called. These are all things that I took from my mom and dad's real life. They really did have an outhouse, and you can look those up and see how lovely those were. But at nighttime, a bedpan would be used. So I'll let you do some research on that. Big Mouth Berta brags about having an indoor bathroom at her house. I can't imagine an outhouse in the middle of the house, but I guess it'd sure be nice not to have to do your business outside in the winter. One of the worst parts of it being cold and snowy was that we couldn't even plan on visiting Charlotte with the roads being so bad. Guess I surprised myself when I came to realize another reason I was mad at Winter was that Ricky needed to stay at his house on the really bad days. Guess I was kind of getting used to him coming around. One cold stretch kept him home for 6 days straight. On his first day back, I felt like I hadn't seen him in a month. We did our chores and then thawed out by the fire. Since Ricky had showed me his letter from his brother, I decided to share my latest one with him. He read the letter like there would be a test on it afterwards. I watched his eyes go back and forth, moving over each line. When he was done, he put the letter down and asked, "Why do you think you gave your sissy polio?" This was something I'd never told a soul other than Charlotte in the letters. But now I took a deep breath and said, "Last summer, Grandma told us over and over that someone in Centerville got polio and that they'd closed the movie theater and the swimming pool just to be safe. She also heard on the news report that polio might get you if you swam in water that was really warm. Same guy on the radio said it was especially bad during the dog days of August, and we should never swim then." Huh? What's the guy on the radio have to do with Charlotte catching polio? I'm getting to that, I said. So it was the hottest day of the year. Grandma had us delivering the eggs to the grocer all summer long. Usually we'd walk home along Elm Street, but that day it was so stinking hot we took a shortcut home through Mill Creek. Most of the creek was dried up that time of year, but there was one spot that ran deep. Oh, it looked inviting and cool, and the sun was beating down so hard on me I couldn't resist. I took off my shoes and started to wade in the water. All I was going to do was wade. Poor Charlotte, since she never broke a rule in her life, scolded me plenty about being in the creek in the dog days of August like the guy on the radio warned about. I looked at Ricky to see if he understood how awful I was. His expression didn't show anything but interest in what I was saying, so I continued. I really was just planning on waiting for a minute. You can't get sick from getting your feet wet, can ya? But Charlotte wasn't allowing that. She came to grab me out of the water, but must have slipped on a rock or something, and she fell, face down. Ricky gasped. In the bad water? Was it bad water? It felt like regular creek water, but all Charlotte and me could think of was the warnings. We shot out of there as fast as we could and swore we wouldn't tell what happened. 2 weeks later, she got the fever. So you see, it's all my fault. Charlotte got polio. But you can't be sure. Except I was as sure of that as I was sure of the fact that I was staring at the blazing fire right then. I stared so long it must have burned my eyes, because all of a sudden tears fell down my cheek. Then I got to shivering so bad my whole body shook. "Are you cold?" Ricky asked. "It's nice and warm right here. Kind of too warm." I shivered again. Come to find out, my burning eyes and shivering were the start of a fever. And just like that, I knew polio finally got me too. So we just found out, it's the end of chapter 19, we just found out why Pixie feels so guilty. We can't really know if that's really the reason, Charlotte got polio, but it doesn't matter because she feels it is. So she feels this tremendous guilt because she wanted to wade in the water that her sissy came and fell in the water and got sick 2 weeks later. So she feels horrible thinking that everything her sissy's gone through is her fault. And now imagine how she feels. She's sitting in front of the fire, shivering and realizing, I probably have polio too. Chapter 20. Can we make any predictions? Do you think she has polio? I would say, but I know. I wrote it. Chapter 20. I wasn't the only one who feared it was my turn to get really sick. When Grandma felt my forehead, I saw in her eyes the same worry I was feeling. I reckon you're warm all right, she said, nodding, her lips pursed together tight. Ricky, I think you ought to be heading home about now. Tell your mama I'll check in with her tomorrow. He stood up. Pixie's going to be okay, right? Grandma's lips found a smile this time. Of course she will be. Probably a silly cold or something. Don't worry. Tell your mama hi. But as soon as Ricky left, Grandma didn't look so certain as she put her hand on my forehead again, followed by her lips. Let me get the thermometer. I wrinkled my nose since that thermometer always tasted of the bitter alcohol it sat in between uses. But before I could protest, Grandma was back and shaking the thermometer down. Open up now. The cool glass warmed fast under my hot tongue. I couldn't even think about the bitter taste since I was watching the worry in Grandma's eyes. And I couldn't quiet the worries in my own head. Is this my turn? Will they be taking me to the hospital tonight? Grandma sensed my worry. You'll be fine, just fine. She put her arm around me and squeezed me tight. Then she pulled the thermometer out of my mouth and tipped to read it where the red line stopped. That's what our thermometers used to do with the mercury in them, and we had to tip them to see what the fever was. Her face couldn't hide a reaction. Let's get you to bed so you can get some rest. What's my temperature? I asked. Never you mind that. You'll be fine, she said again, but this time I wasn't sure which one of us she was trying to convince. Grandma tucked me into bed while Daddy went to the Browns' house to call Doc Simpson. My eyes felt so heavy I had a hard time keeping them open, but still I couldn't sleep. Daddy came up to see me when he got back. How are you doing? He asked, touching the top of my head, his hands ice cold. Not good. He sat on the edge of my bed. I know what you're thinking, and I want you to know that Doc Simpson said polio doesn't spread much during the winter, and you definitely couldn't catch it from Charlotte 5 months earlier. He said for us to keep an eye on you, and he'll be out tomorrow to check in on you. That night, tired and achy as I was, I tossed and turned. Grandma stayed with me, putting cool wet towels on my forehead. By the weak light of the moon, I could see her in the rocking chair. She'd moved into my room with her head down. I guessed her to be asleep, but I had to tell her nonetheless. I deserve to get polio. Grandma didn't move her head, but her words came out louder than a whisper. Don't talk nonsense. Her eyes stayed shut. But I do. I deserve to get the polio. It's my fault. Charlotte's sick. It would be right if I got it too. Grandma got out of her rocking chair and sat next to me on my bed. I was certain she was going to demand I confess my sins right there, but her face was kinder than I'd ever seen it before. She put the back of her hand gently on my forehead, tickling me a bit when she brushed away my hair. What's right is that you get better. What's right is that I don't lose another of my girls. Now hush and get some rest. I think I finally slept then. When I woke in the morning, Grandma was still there. Maybe it was the fever making me what Charlotte would call delirious, but I swear when I blinked my eyes open, Grandma called me Pixie. Doc Simpson came out later that morning and assured us what I had didn't look at all like polio, but he was sure some bad tasting medicine would make my burning throat better. He wanted Grandma to keep me home from school a few days, which was fine with me. For the first couple of days, I think we all worried the doctor might be wrong. Grandma was never far from my side, and on the rare moment when she wasn't next to me, Granddaddy or Daddy took her place. But after lots of chicken soup and yucky medicine, my fever broke, and I could finally swallow without it feeling like broken glass. No sooner was I out of bed than I got the best news. Well, not the best news, since that would have been that Charlotte was coming home. But I got the second best news I could get. I was sitting with Granddaddy listening to the radio playing music I imagined people in fancy clothes dancing to. I'd shut my eyes to picture the dancing in my head. You feeling better, Prudence? My eyes popped open, surprised to see Daddy standing there, his cheeks still red from the winter winds. He rubbed his hands together and blew on them to warm them. I'm so much better, Daddy. He sat down next to me. Well, good, 'cause I got a big job for you. Now, I wasn't feeling good enough to do my jobs around the farm. I'd enjoyed the break being sick gave me from the dishes, and especially from gathering the eggs. Maybe I'm not that much better, Daddy, I said. Granddaddy laughed as Daddy continued. I'll bet you'll like this job. You see, Clyde Grayson has a ewe who had triplets. That's a lot of babies for one sheep to take care of. and she had him too early. The mama ain't tending to one of the lambs, rejecting it. That's awful. How could a mama do that to her baby? Granddaddy spoke up. That's just the way nature works sometimes, Pixie. Sometimes a mama won't feed one of her babies. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for it. Daddy nodded. That's right. And Clyde was saying he was thinking about killing the lamb so the other 2 baby lambs could grow stronger. Oh, Daddy, don't let him kill the baby lamb. I thought you'd say that. I suggested to Clyde that we take the lamb in and raise it. But it would have to be your job to feed it and care for it. Do you think you could do that? But before you answer, keep in mind this here's a farm. The lamb will be an animal on the farm, not a pet you get to keep. Of course, I knew the lamb would be an animal on the farm. That didn't matter. I'd still try my best. But was my best ever good enough? So, do you think she gets the lamb? Oh. I bet, because we made that prediction based on the cover, that she does get the lamb. So we're going to stop there with Pixie feeling better. And that little thing they talked about with, sometimes in nature, a mother just senses that one is maybe weaker and she must take care of the stronger ones. And sometimes people in farms would have to do that. So that did happen back then. And so a lot of times people would then bottle feed the lambs. And that's actually the way my mom ended up getting her lambs when she grew up on the farm, that people would have where lambs, the mama would reject them and she would have to bottle feed them. So what's coming up is a little bit from my mom's childhood. So I love to tell those stories too. So I'm hoping that you are enjoying Pixie's story. We heard about her scary time of thinking she had polio. Can you imagine how Grandma and Grandpa and Daddy must have felt too about that, thinking, oh my, is another one getting it? And again, it's so scary when you don't know what's going on. And we all can relate to that with everything today in the world. So I think that the most important thing is to not overreact, to be careful, but to also just love each other and to be there for each other. So I wish you good things for the rest of the day. I wish you lots of reading. Keep reading, keep being safe, and keep being kind, because I know you are. Have a great day. Bye-bye.